How many of you get bone-in briskets? That's an old deal, but that, when you first cut them off the carcass, they still have bones attached. And I've just taken this part of it and just erased it from the picture. So we're looking at it with the leg off right there, so you can see where that brisket actually lies and how much of it is where. So, again, we talk about, and this is terms that you really don't have to know, but like Jeff was talking about, if you notice what I did, where this line is, the brisket chuck separation is done at the juncture of the first rib and the sternum in that cartilage that connects those. Okay? So there's little bits of cartilage that connect the rib to the sternum. And I know it's real technical, but at least you kind of get an idea of why some of those things are there. So when we take these off, like Jeff said, sometimes you'll get a little film of cartilage or a little bit of what you call bone or gristle there that is truly, it truly is bone or cartilage. And so it's good to take that off and be sure you get that off. But we go perpendicular to the cut here right at the 5th rib. And so that's, again, the area we're talking about. That's the plate brisket. You'll hear people talking about the plate brisket separation, the brisket chuck. Now, I want to kind of build this, because what we've got here is the bones, and I've just kind of showed you where it is. That deep pectoral muscle, that flap, lies right up next to those bones. Essentially, there's some fat in between, but essentially that's where it lies. So notice, again, like I said, back here in the plate, there's a piece of the deep pectoral muscle. There's a piece still left up here on the chuck. And that, you know, is kind of cool. And we've got some things with our meat judging team where they have to know where that is so that they can identify and understand how that muscle flows on the carcass. But there is a part of this that kind of makes sense as of seeing some of the variation that you guys see in briskets somewhat in the stores. Sometimes you see those really wide briskets, don't you? Sometimes you see some that are, you know, there's times where they're pretty darn narrow. Some of that's a weight thing. Some of it's just a factor of the size, the weight of the cattle. Some of it's a monetary thing. This muscle is used several different ways. If it's in this brisket, we know how it's used. Jeff told you about another way that some of that's being used. This portion up here in the chuck gets sold as pectoral meat. I said that's a deep pectoral muscle. It's sold as pectoral meat. It's sold denuded. Now, that's a real weird meat term, because a meat term that says it's denuded, you know, if something's nude, you expect it what to be? I mean, what do you expect it to be? Don't have anything on it, right? So you'd think that'd be all the fat off. The way the meat industry works is, as Nick knows, is totally backwards from everything. Denuded means it doesn't have any fat on it. Okay? So that's kind of the way that's set up. Now, when I say it's an economic thing, we looked up briskets this morning. And this is if you wanted to buy 40,000 pounds, so don't go ask, you know, local retailer to give you these prices. But select brisket was $205, and choice, can't read my own handwriting there, was $208, I think. We actually got them switched earlier in the week. The choice was cheaper than select. $205, $208. At the same time, this little piece up here is going for $264. So let's just say 60 cents a pound difference. And this piece is going to weigh usually a couple of pounds. So that's $1.20. Times 2 sides, which is $240 per head. Times 5,000 head a day. Do the math. That's a $10,000 or more difference, because they sold that as pectoral meat and kept that from being a brisket that we'd barbecued. So there are times of the year especially when they're using that product for other things like, we've got a company here in town that uses pectoral meat almost exclusively for, they run it through a cutlet machine and they sell it for chicken fried steak. Most everybody here come produce chicken fried steak. Well, maybe not everybody, but most everybody. So cutlets, okay? So they can, there's a demand for that. So what are they going to do if Packer can make that much more money on it? This line starts to come down here. And so sometimes when you're getting those really narrow briskets, there's an economic reason why that's happening. There's not a whole lot we can do about it unless you want to buy a lot of briskets. But that's one of the reasons why it happens that way.
There's something else, I've been in plants, let me show you something else I've seen. In particular, because they're pulling these off of the carcass going down the rail without having to go through this connection, they'll reach back in here and grab some of this.
So when you get some of those really long ones, sometimes.
So when you see some of those real long ones, you're getting a little bit of this, and then maybe getting it more cut like this in that.
And sometimes it's a compensation. Sometimes if they drop this line down, then they'll come back here further. If you got, if that kind of straight end of the brisket is not straight, it's real angular, that's usually what's happened. They've gone back further and made that cut. Okay?